because the last one, we had a little bit of complications. So first and foremost, if you're watching this, you are watching this because you want to be here to build your dream life, build your dream career, all these aspects. I couldn't be happier to be able to support you in this journey. Now let me grab the link to share with everybody. Here we go. Everybody's joining now. So let me adjust video. I just need to make sure it's not for kids. Boom. So whenever these small problems happen, new to the whole streaming thing. So whenever things like this happen, I got to make sure to go in, let's clean this up, let's fix it so we understand everything that's happening. So first things first, let's go through one more time, agenda for today's calls. Great to have everyone here. Putting this in the chat. Let's talk about the chat. So first things first, what I need everybody to do right now while we're hanging out, I need everybody's takeaways from yesterday. So the agenda for today, we're going to cover the daily law in just a moment. After we cover the daily law, we're then going to do a recap of everybody's takeaways from yesterday. I'm going to look at the Discord takeaways. We're going to go through the case study one more time for Twitter, and why we learned the reality of there's this idea in tech of layoffs and how it's impossible to get into the industry. And looking at the non-obvious solution of, oh, this is actually a good thing. It's good that they had layoffs. How is it good for somebody who's new trying to get into the industry? We're going to talk about that just to make sure you're grounded in truth. After that, we're going to finish the recruiting video from yesterday. My goal, as we've always talked about, let's be as rational as possible for everything that we're doing. I want to connect you to reality. So during this job search, all the nonsense that we hear in the background, you're able to really separate that nonsense from the truth of the matter. And as we're going through this, I want to know every single moment, what are the things that you love in the chat? And what are the things that you're confused about? And one thing I'm going to do every single stream, of course, Peter's going to be coming on for a long interview towards probably in about an hour. So you're going to want to stay very closely attuned. I want one student between now and then to come on to do some Q&A with us to kind of work through everything that we're seeing. So if you want to be that student, let me know in the chat. Alex, I would love to have you on. You're always a rock star student. So I might just invite you on point blank. But we will get that figured out as we go a little bit forward. But real quickly, just good morning to everybody that is here. Couldn't be happier to have everybody on this morning. It'll be a good, fun Friday for all of us. Now, let's go ahead and move forward to our daily law for the day. Now, I do want to do a quick recap. We're going to recap yesterday's, and we're going to come into today. The entire goal of this is you need to be thinking through how are you improving on a daily basis. By the way, I'm not seeing everybody putting in all their information to Slack where they are. Everybody, please, inside Discord, inside YouTube, put where you are in the program so we can keep track of everybody here. Now, we're going to switch over to yesterday's law, just to reincorporate it real quickly, then we'll go to today's law. So yesterday's law was think for yourself. We human beings tend to be incredibly conventional animals. We get ideas from our parents, from our schooling, from the people around us. And that becomes how we think about everything in the world. We stop thinking for ourselves, and with social media, this has become much worse. We're afraid to think for ourselves. The classic example of this cowardice in thinking comes from academia. The people who are supposed to be the most brilliant thinkers of all time, many of whom have been largely indoctrinated into a particular way of thinking and looking at the world, are filled with jargon and orthodoxies. They can never get outside of it. Everything they write, everything they see, everything they think about is in that little bubble that they have been included in with their academic trainings. You need to be fearless in your pursuit of learning. You need to be able to get rid of everything that you've ever believed in. You have to be able to challenge everything. You need to get rid of all the strategies that you've used before, because those strategies are what got you here today. All of the conventional ideas that you know of, it's time to throw them out the door. That's why we talked so much about non-obvious solutions and your war elephant strategy. We'll talk more about it later. So the commandment from this, you need to think for yourself and not be tied to what other people have told you that is reality. So crucial. Now, let's move over to October 11th, today's daily law. And if anything about yesterday stands out, let me know. The goal of covering these laws is to give you something that you can learn on a daily basis. And I have to send this link to one person real fast. The really sweet person that I'm dating said they wanted to join this to watch from time to time. So I thought it'd be really fun to send this to her. Now, going back to this. Sappy moment's over, everybody. October 11th. Today's Beware of the Fragile Ego. And does anybody remember on Monday what we talked about? And the impact it had on ego. If you remember, put it in the chat. This is big. What we talked about was when you're starting a new job search, when you're starting any process, what typically ends up happening is we start the process, we experience some failure, and then what happens after that, ego hits in when we fail. And ego starts the process of comparison. When we start the comparison game, we look at why are we not having success but everybody else is? Why are they doing this and they're doing this but I'm not doing this? Why are they doing better? Well, they must be doing better because of this. Then we start creating these cognitive biases and this cognitive dissonance where we start separating ourselves from reality. And we start looking for validation on our failure rather than charging the reality of the world, challenging that so that we can grow. And when you live in that world, when you're looking for validation on your failure rather than challenging your failure to grow, which is way harder, by the way, we can all agree on that, you fall into this slippery slope. You fall into the slope of everybody on Reddit who's angry and bitter and feeling so helpless. The purpose of these calls is to pull you away from that. That's why we cover everything from the job search. We're going to cover everything from how to stand out, connecting you to the reality of business, everything along those lines. And don't judge me too much. I apparently have a filled throat, so I'm going to clear my throat real fast. Now, let's continue here. October 11th, beware the fragile ego. Of all the human emotions, none are uglier or more elusive than envy. And envy, comparing yourselves. The sensation that others have more of what we want, possessions, attention, respect. We deserve to have as much as they do, but feel somewhat helpless to get such things. But paradoxically, envy entails the admission to ourselves that we are inferior to other people's and something that we value. So when we look at other people, we're like, we don't have that. Why don't we have those things? Not only is it painful to admit to this inferiority, but it's even worse for others to see that we are feeling this. When people see that you're envious, it is disgusting. And so, almost as soon as we feel the initial pangs of envy, we're motivated to disguise it to ourselves. It is not envy we feel, but unfairness at the distribution of goods or attention, or resentment at this unfairness, even anger. So is it common for us when we feel envious to start looking that the world is unfair and hide it to ourselves and justify that the only reason they had that is because they cheated? They had rich parents. How many of the times do we see somebody with a nice vehicle, watch, anything along those lines? We're like, must have had nice parents. It's envy. The underlying sense of inferiority is too strong, leading to hostility that cannot be vented by a comment or put down. Sitting with one's envy over a long period of time can be painful and frustrating. Feeling righteous indignation against the envied person, however, can be invigorating. Acting on envy, doing something to harm the other person, brings satisfaction. Although the satisfaction is short-lived because enviers always find something new to envy. They fall into the cycle of always being envious. Now, I want to know in the chat right now, how many of us have felt this? I just want to, obviously I've felt this, right? I get angry and I let my ego step in. When I go to Reddit, I hear people roasting dev slopes because they feel envious about the fact that they're not doing well, but they've seen other people in the program go well. And they're not having success because it's dev slope's fault. It's not because I couldn't make the time for it, which is one of the things we talked about yesterday, right? These are all the things that it's okay to experience these emotions. One of the goals of this call is to be able to understand and separate the foundations and grounding ourselves in reality versus what those emotions are, right? Is this emotion right, or is it just something I'm experiencing? Most of the time with those feelings of envy or anything along those lines, those are not real emotions. It's not the truth. It's just something that you're feeling. So here's the daily law. Envy is perhaps the ugliest human emotion. Destroy it before it destroys you. Develop your sense of self-worth from internal standards and not incessant comparisons. So what we know for a fact, and we have some students who are further in the program in the chat right now, right? How many of you have experienced success and benefit of comparing your inadequacies to others in the program? I'm here and I just feel like I can't make it further, but I see Bob over here is able to make it over here, right? Zach Bay was able to get a job and I just don't get it. I know that Fadi was able to get a freelance project, but that's just because he was special. That's not because I'm special. What's up, Eric? It's great to see you again, man. Patrick, Mr. Ortiz, Alex, all of y'all, couldn't be happier to have you here. But envy in this process, like for example, it can make so much sense for everybody to be envious of Alex in the chat. Alex has made well over $1,000, I believe, from freelancing. He's been able to use that money within the program to go out and get some cool things. He's won that money from hackathons inside the program. It'd be so easy to look at Alex and be like, well, he just did it because he's better at communicating, and I don't have that, so I'm not going to be able to do it. So honestly, I just don't know if I'm going to be able to. And frankly, he's only having that success because he's special. Like he has something that I don't have. It'd be so easy. And I think it's so important for us to ground ourselves in, hey, these are not real things. So now, what I want to look into, and one of the reasons every time we come through this, we always want to look at what are the takeaways from the previous day. So for all of you, I want y'all to make sure that you're letting us know what are the takeaways that you had from the previous day, right? I'm even going to put this on the stream for a second. You're so right, Alex, on what that does, what that envy does. So we're going to jump over to Discord real quickly, and we're going to talk about yesterday. We're going to talk about the takeaways we had. And I was really impressed with Patrick. A lot of you just had some amazing, amazing takeaways. Let's scroll up here. We had a lot of things happen yesterday. Okay, cool. So we wrapped up the call. First, Patrick, let's start with yours. I think the law of the day is a really great habit for every stream and great to challenge our pre-existing conceptions. Just for notes, Madness and Groot. Never relinquish your ability to doubt, reflect, or consider other actions, right? The power of association. Be aware of the power of those that you associate with. In addition, think for yourself. Do not tie yourself to what others think that is reality. This is so, so powerful. It's the equivalence of when you're trying to break the 5-minute mile or the 4-minute mile. No one thought it was possible until one person did it. So the more that you could surround yourself with the people that are winning, the better off that you're going to do. We got the war elephant, which is the tattoo that we talked about, right? How do you find your non-obvious solutions? I wouldn't say uncommon. We want to say non-obvious solutions. Then we had some keys to getting started with freelancing. Join Rakim's calls, join Dustin's calls, Upwork and the reimbursement program. If you don't know about our reimbursement program, everybody, please, 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 please go ask about it as soon as possible. For those of you that don't know about the reimbursement program, let me know in the chat because I need to know how many people actually don't know what this is. And setting the 10 proposals a day. Let's go over to Bradley Console, Console. Biggest takeaway is to find some way to stand out and be competent. You can do the same thing as everybody else and fail continuously, taking your shot. And you can take the correct steps and actually succeed without having 98% luck. Oh wait, who thought the 98% number yesterday absolutely jumped out to them? That 98% of all developers that are applying to jobs have no experience in that role. That's kind of a terrifying thing to think about, right? It's kind of a terrifying thing to imagine that 98% of all people don't know what they're talking about. The consistent application of jobs without proper qualifications, like putting blindfold on, trying to shoot a shotgun at a moving target. I would say a pistol, not a shotgun, but I get the analogy. Doing the work to learn, network, and gain repetitions is more like the precision shooting, unless you're lazy, and I love that. Russ, biggest takeaway is to stay one step ahead. And also, I dislike no-code solutions. Only if Phil refuses new tech to make their life easier. Then I find like Nate has better tattoos than me. I appreciate this. Cool. So this is a great start for everything that we have going on, right? This is a great start. Quentin, it's great to have you on the call. Super excited about all you guys. So in addition, one thing I want to emphasize is the takeaway that we had when it came to, let me stop the screen share, is the takeaway that we had when it came to the case study with Tesla. Who here remembers the case study with Tesla from, or not Tesla, with Twitter? I want everybody to let me know who remembers the case study from Twitter yesterday. I really want to have everybody letting me know in the chat who remembers it, because we're gonna come back to it real briefly, right? And it started with talking about layoffs, right? So I'm gonna briefly cover this, then we'll move on to the training video. So one, actually, Alex, if you're free, I want to invite you on the stream and we can start talking about this now, because I think that, especially after speaking with Peter yesterday, he felt like this was a wildly powerful thing for us to talk about. So I'm going to reach out to you right now to invite you on the stream. Was not here yesterday? Fantastic. All of you who were not here yesterday, y'all are about to be in for an absolute treasure. Alex, I'm just trying to find you in Discord to send you the link to join. Alexander, cool. All right, Alex, I'm sending you a link to invite you on the video. Boom, just sending it to you. Just send it to you right now. If you want to hop in, let's start talking about this. And whenever you join, we will go into more detail. So what we're going to be covering in just a moment. Yep. Everybody, y'all are about to learn so many things. The vast majority of you who thought that the layoffs in tech were bad, you're about to have a breakthrough. You're about to say, oh my God, this makes sense. The purpose of us covering this is to do a better job connecting you to the reality is it a good or a bad thing that all of the layoffs happened at Twitter? And what you're going to find relatively quickly is that the layoffs were good. We want them to happen. We need the layoffs. Ironically, the more that those layoffs happen, the more that the company has the capacity to go out and find good developers again. That's why this is so crucial. It's an uncomfortable conversation because it seems inhuman at times, but ironically, it's one of the best things that can take place. Now, Alex is hopping in. Cool. Let me let Alex in. What's going on, brother?
Hi.
First and foremost, how do you feel about this format?
This, in general, to be honest, way back when you first announced this and I hopped on a first call, I think that was my proper sort of kick in the butt to remotivate myself and understand that, like, okay, I just need to run through this and become a go-getter. And since then, I've progressed 10% in the program. So,
when was our last call?
I think it was at the start of the month or
You've increased
a little
10%
before.
of progress in the program that fast?
Yeah, so it's just a lot of JavaScript essentially. So I got stuck at one of the exercises towards the end of the intro, and then I picked myself back up and said, okay, listen, try to figure out how to get through this. And I got through this and I got through the project. And ever since then, I've just been working away and joining calls with Tyler and asking him whenever I had a proposed solution and made sure that he would check it so that I would get it. So
tell me Tyler isn't the best, by the way. Is he not one of the best
I love
mentors you've
Tyler.
ever had?
Yeah, I adore Tyler. Okay.
So here's the rules for what we're about to go through. Your job is to really be the student in this conversation, right?
Yes.
So let's cover a couple things. I'm going to always cover it from the business perspective. I need you to cover it from the student perspective. And the goal here is that we are able to come together on, okay, I understand now from my perspective and the employer's perspective, and I now know how to connect the dots. And one of the reasons we do this, critical thinking skills can only be developed whenever you go beyond being a tactician. So a lot of you right now are learning tactically how to do your job. It's fantastic and it's really helpful. But the problem is you're getting into job interviews like everybody else. And you look bad. A lot of you look really bad in the job interviews. And one of the reasons why is you don't understand the business application of what you're actually doing. So the Twitter case study is just a perfect example of how you need to grow to understand a business perspective. Little odd, I get it, but we're going to stick together. So first, we're going to start off with a couple things. I'm going to share my screen here, Alex. And as we go through, I don't want you to think about the right answer that I'm looking for. I want you to talk about how you feel as we go through this, right? About how your initial thoughts on this. So number one, Twitter laid off 80% of their employees. And mostly developers. What does that make you think as somebody who's wanting to get into software engineering?
So I've actually been reviewing Twitter a lot as it was happening. I've read tweets from people that got laid off, and I watched the entire process unfold in real time. My current perspective on this is that it's not necessarily a developer issue, but it was probably, the company restructuring that took place, everything that Ellen did. Nobody really gets it. So that's my perspective on the thing from like how I've seen it play out.
Now, to keep in mind, did this make you feel like this potentially caused concerns with software engineering? Like, especially seeing that more companies started laying off developers afterwards. Because we saw after Twitter did this, Microsoft, LinkedIn, and a lot of other major blue chip SaaS companies had layoffs. After Twitter did it, a lot of people followed case. How did that make you feel? If you hear that, like there's been lots of layoffs in tech over the past 2 to 3 years, how does that make you feel?
I think that it's definitely intimidating, and you wonder, like, someone would wonder, is it worth it to pursue a career? But I guess there's something that I already learned throughout the process, that it's like, if you want to get in, there's potentially smaller businesses that are still looking for a really good developer. You might not get into a higher, in air quotes, higher quality company, but it's still a growing business that a lot of other companies might be looking for. I get that it's a little concerning when it's like the big names, because a lot of people kind of follow the opinions of the big names. So
give me a little details. One of the things I think is fair, is it fair to say that it feels kind of unsafe in this industry? Maybe it makes you question, is this a good decision?
A little. I think that not just the layoffs play into that, but also the entire AI situation. A lot of people say AI plays into this, and AI can start writing code, and AI is going to take our jobs. So that's another layer that's in front of a lot of people at the moment too.
Everybody, I want y'all to put in the chat right now as a reminder for later. Will AI take our jobs? Because when Peter comes on, he's going to be perfect to talk to about this. You know what I mean? Like, of all people, Alex, like I feel like Peter's somebody great. And Alex, what I'll probably do is invite you back on to chat with me and Peter about this. I think that's an amazing idea. Right? The more that we can continue to collaborate and be like, hey, what's the truth? Right? Because at the end of the day, what all of these are heuristics. It's just biases that we've built in our brain. These are all essentially opinions that we've developed. Right? This is how we feel about this. The thing that we need to then ask is, what were our, don't judge me too much on the spelling, what were our biases and decisions built on? Are we qualified to have these, let's say, grade red, right, opinions? That's what we want to do here, above all else. So this thing right here, I'm even going to highlight it in red right here. I'm going to highlight this in red. They give me like a weird pinkish red, I guess. This thing is going to dictate all of our emotions. We're trying to learn right now, but these questions are in our head 24/7. You know what this isn't even factoring in? This isn't even factoring in the secondary problem. You know what the secondary problem is, Alex?
No.
How the hell am I going to learn this? This is so goddamn hard, right? Like this is like, am I smart enough? Like on top of these ultimate larger concerns, dude, you're questioning yourself every day.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, the insidious 8. The insidious 8 are just hitting you every single day. So on top of you having the big picture concern, just like how you mentioned that previously you've been stuck in an exercise, we have those secondary concerns at a lot of the time. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard to take that action when you feel like, am I even smart enough for this? Am I going to be able to do this? Right?
Right. I think that I've learned something for myself, that when I either find myself stuck or I'm unsure, there's people to hop on calls with or ask questions to. I think there's ways to overcome your, I call it inner saboteur. Sometimes you just need somebody to really explain something to you properly to see if you're on the right track or not. And it's nothing about someone being stupid or not capable. It's about your approach and your strategy, and how willing you are to receive help. Some people have an ego to themselves naturally, and they have this drive to like want to learn something by themselves. But I think that's not always possible, especially in such a complex field as software engineering as I'm experiencing. Because right now in next level JavaScript, there's a new method, like every video, new thing, new thing, new thing, and you just need to be on top of it.
So it's almost like your ego's getting in the way and you're too prideful to ask for help. You don't want to be seen as stupid.
Yeah. Yes. I think that
I'd be
that
interested
definitely
to see
is
how many
something.
students feel like they experience that.
I think I've had some conversations where people were naturally a little hesitant to ask. I do think that an inner bias of this is a stupid question kind of runs within every person. But the thing is, when you're learning, when you don't get it, when you have no clue what you're doing, there really is no stupid question, because if you don't know the answer, it's not a stupid question. You're trying to get the answer, right?
So what was your way to actually go through that? Just so we're like, I think this is a really helpful area. We can come back to the Twitter case study in a second. What was your case for kind of solving this?
Like, you mean in general, like the overcoming asking questions?
Yeah, because I mean, I feel like even I experienced that. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to ask for help when things are sticky and you don't want to seem like the dumb person in the group.
Yeah, so I think that within this environment, at first, you're a little intimidated. You don't know how the mentors are. You've not really interacted with them. Some people may have just joined the curriculum and they're like, am I supposed to ask questions? But most of the time you hop on a mentor call and they're waiting for you to ask something, anything. And if that's your current problem and you're stuck at it, that's their job, essentially, right? Like, they want to help you, they're here to help you. And the more questions you ask, the easier it gets in the process. So you just need to start asking your first question, you get an answer, you ask your second question, your third question, and it becomes a habit of learning suddenly a week or two later.
So it's like you have to become a professional learner almost. Like you just have to continue to ask it and just go through the pain of, I'm going to feel and look stupid for a while.
I would say so, yes.
Is that a fair way to go about it?
I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't say it makes someone stupid. Some people might feel silly because they don't understand. But the only way to really dig yourself out of a hole that's like very deep is to have someone extend another tool to you, which is a mentor or other students who've already gone through it.
I love that. So what you're emphasizing almost above all else is that time needs to be taken to reach out to people in the community, to reach out to mentors, to understand that if you don't learn how to kind of put your ego to the side, be comfortable looking a little stupid, right?
Yeah.
and asking for help, I mean, ultimately, you will never be able to make progress.
Yeah, I think in a job life too, when you're new and you're kind of trying to integrate and understand what the company life is like and what the structure of your entire zone is like, you're going to ask questions to your superior as well. So the earlier you understand that it's perfectly human to ask questions, the easier the process becomes.
And again, one thing I want to ask everybody in the chat is who experiences this? Right? So, for example, if you have issues retaining information, if you have issues with all these aspects, typically it's from the aspect of not feeling comfortable enough to ask questions. So please feel free, reach out, ask questions. That's why I want the chat to be so engaged here. Now, while we wait for that, we're going to come back to this response real quickly, right? This case study. Twitter laid off about 80% of their employees, mostly developers. Everybody had their opinions on why this happened, why it was bad, why it was good. Mostly because everybody's saying Elon's a fucking idiot. He is a bad person for doing this. He is an idiot. Every developer and their mom was saying he's the worst human on earth, that he doesn't know what he's doing, right? Everybody's saying that, yet he's the richest person in the world. And then in addition, afterwards, companies like Twitter, Microsoft, LinkedIn, and other major blue chip companies started having gigantic layoffs. By the way, what Elon did has never happened in history for tech companies. No one has ever done what he did. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Now, the reason I want to bring this up to everybody is this little cycle. I want to bring this up, right? So the cycle looks something like this, right? It's always a mountain in a valley, a peak in a valley. So I want to kind of draw some arrows to give some ideas. This and this are different things. Okay, I don't know why we're doing multiple. Okay, that's cool, man. Okay, we're just gonna keep doing this. I was about to say, why does it keep drawing? Okay, so a couple things. These are different stages of a company, right? This stage right here, where things are going up, this is a growth stage. This stage right here, this is layoffs. The term here is cash flow, right? So growth stage equals hiring and growing the company and software. All the companies you're going to work at, they're going to hire you on to help grow the company, add more features and benefits to improve the experience so that they can ultimately make more money, right? So if you add more features onto Facebook, you can increase the duration they're on Facebook and i.e. make more money off them as a user from advertising, right? So we understand what the growth stage is. Here's the funny part. Layoffs. Layoffs are good because number one, you trim the fat. I know this is a brutal way to say it, but again, my job is just to provide the business POV. I want y'all to understand how the business views it. I don't care if it seems good. It's going to be very brutal. But the more that you understand the positive and the bad, and you could really understand the ugly, you understand what game is being played. This is why I mentioned yesterday, the reason why so many individuals from disadvantaged communities, typically low-income communities, don't make the job is all they think about is the good things. They have no understanding of the bad and the ugly. And when you don't understand the bad and the ugly, you don't know how to sell yourself because you have to be able to address the bad and the ugly and how you can help minimize that. So when they do layoffs, they trim the fat. Number two, they need to save money. So an example of this, when you're growing, typically when companies are growing, this is so important for everybody to be mindful of. You're hiring more employees. This is the black and white fact of what happens when you're growing. You're hiring more employees. Two, your revenue is increasing. But typically when you're growing, does anybody know what else happens? Alex, I would like to hear, do you have an idea of what else is happening typically when a company is growing and scaling?
Okay, so more employees, revenues increasing. There's probably some sort of pressure to make sure that you can like uphold your standard if you're setting the bar very high, very early.
Okay.
And I want to say there's also, the more employees you hire, the more complicated the structure gets, because maybe you have 20 leads and suddenly you decide you need to hire a new manager. So 2 managers can oversee a certain amount of people. So you need to be more, you need to start becoming more specific, like what kind of people you hire, and what you really need for the company at the moment.
I'm actually I'm gonna address this real quickly. They're answering this really well in the chat. Do you see what they're saying in the chat by
Yeah,
chance?
increase in expenses. Yeah,
Exactly.
the more people you hire, the more you have to pay too.
So what ends up happening? Increased expenses and decreased cash flow. So long story short, cash flow can be summarized as this. We're actually going to go to Google. We'll just let Google summarize it. Cash flow is the movement of money in and out of the company over a period of time. If a company's inflows of cash exceeds its outflows, then it's positive. If outflows exceeds inflows, it's negative. So long story short, cash flow equals, are you spending more than you're making? This is really, really important. Typically, what happens when you're in a grow phase, you go out and you hire a lot of people. You're going to hire 10, let's say you have a team case study. We're going to do a case study. Team of 10 developers. And you want to grow to add more features and do a lot of cool stuff. So you hire 20 new devs over the course of 1 year. Right? That's a scary thing to think about. Hiring 20 developers is a horrifying thing to think about. Like, Alex, think about whenever you had to work with the 3 to 4 other people on your hackathon projects. Was that hard to organize?
I think from my experience, it was fine, but I think the more people you get, the harder it becomes in terms of assigning tasks and making sure everyone pulls their weight. And make sure everyone understands what's happening.
Exactly. So when you start increasing expenses and cash flow, right? So your expenses increase and your cash flow decreases. So your profit drops. So if we know that when you're growing, you're hiring more employees, your revenue is going up, right? Can you increase and keep a high bar for hiring? This is going to be one of the most important things we talk about. I'm going to highlight this. This is really, really important right here. I'm going to try to put this. Oh, damn it, I can't. Okay. We'll put all this back to this color. I'm going to put this as a question down below, because this actually relates to Peter. So we'll leave this straight for facts for right now. Now, where things get interesting, these are the facts of what happens when you grow. Now, what do you think happens when people have layoffs?
Oh, is that a question for me?
Yeah. What happens in a layoff? Right? They trim the fat. They need to save money. What else happens for a company during a layoff?
There's media news. I think that the media always reports if a major company has layoffs. There's going to be employees that are upset and they're going to have their opinions. It depends how far the people that are being laid off are, but I think sometimes there's also, I forget what the term for it is, but there's like a certain amount that people are paid when they're let go. Is it severance?
Yep.
And of course, the entire structure changes. And so the employees that are still left over, they're going to have to sort of find a new flow of work, because suddenly the work that you were splitting between 20 people might just be split between 8.
So this is really, really interesting, what we're about to start getting into. Disgruntled employees, they get severance packages. There's more work sent to your current employees. There's bad media news, all of these things. So I'm going to now start addressing this from the business POV, right? This is the thing that we covered yesterday that it took a while for everybody to really understand. I really want to take time to make sure everybody understands this, because this speaks to why it is okay that so many developers were let go. So let's overview this real quickly. They laid off 80% of their employees, and they're mostly developers. It makes a lot of us think that, hey, maybe this is not a safe industry. Maybe I picked the wrong industry to get into. There's layoffs happening all over the place. This is not good, right? Then we look at, okay, where are we in this cycle? We're in this cycle. Layoffs are happening. All of these things are happening in this cycle right now. Now I want to show you a couple things. I want to give you the business POV. I'm going to actually take it a little bit further. The business/shareholder POV. Does everybody know what the business and what shareholders are by chance in the chat? I'll go ahead and explain. The shareholders are the people that own equity and stocks in that company. Now, Alex, who do you think dictates what's happening within a company? What does a company look to just keep happy?
So from what I know, sometimes there's board meetings where every stakeholder can have a vote in the happenings, but usually the person that has the most equity within a company, especially if someone has, for example, 51% equity, they technically can make decisions on their own. But in general, it should be determined by voters of people who have a little more equity within.
Yeah. So let's think about DevSlopes real quickly. I own DevSlopes, right? Who is all the employees ultimately report to who? Me, right? Now, because I'm CEO and owner of the company, I report to myself essentially. Like, it's my job to make sure that the company is making money and that it's going in the right direction, right? Now, let's think about this differently. We will use Apple. Every decision that the CEO of Apple makes, who does it impact?
Everyone that's working there and every shareholder.
Unfortunately, do you know what the funny part about this is? The CEO doesn't wake up usually and think about the employees of large companies like that.
Mm-hmm.
They care more about the shareholders. And the reason why, if the value of their share drops 20%, billions of dollars is lost in one day. So think about this. The CEO typically reports to a board of directors or their investors. Every company that all of you will go work at most likely will work for a company where the CEO will report to investors. Think about in Silicon Valley. Has everybody seen Silicon Valley? I hope you all have. If you haven't, you need to go watch Silicon Valley. It's hilarious. Have you not seen Silicon Valley, Alex? Oh my God, dude.
I'm not really good with movies.
Dude, it's a TV show, man. It's not even a movie.
Or media in general.
Oh my God. Okay. Dude.
Apparently I have to now.
Bro, you have to go watch Silicon Valley. It is so funny. Okay, long story short. Silicon Valley is about this startup that ends up getting these investors and all these things. And it's a really cool story. But long story short, your goal is to make sure that your shareholders are getting their value and it's going up in money. And if they get unhappy, they will fire you as the CEO. And guess what happens if they fire the CEO? They will typically replace all the other executives. So everybody loses their jobs if things do not go well, right? A good example of this is the CEO of Starbucks was just fired, right?
Oh.
The CEO of Starbucks was fired and replaced with the CEO of Chipotle, which is pretty funny. Long story short. So the reason why I bring this up, when a company is growing, do you have an idea of what happens with the stock price?
I think it usually fluctuates.
That's
honestly.
true. But what does it typically do?
I want to say that it's going up, but yeah, because the more when it's growing, the more people buy stock, the higher the price becomes.
Right? So when a company is growing, we're going to do this. Typically, the stock price will do this. Typically, when a company is growing, that's what's happening. Now, when a company has layoffs, right? Because typically a company goes through one of two stages. They're growing or they're having layoffs, right? What do you think happens when a company starts to have layoffs?
It goes down, and some of it is partly impacted by the media too. But usually when you see, I want to say scandals in the news or anything that criticizes a company structure, then you see the stock tanking for a little bit.
So when a company has layoffs, we know for a fact it starts going downhill, right? A company starts going downhill when they have layoffs. So here's the funny part. When a company is growing, and this is what Peter's going to come on to talk about in just a little bit, these two things are something that you need to memorize. Out of everything that we talk about in your job search, these two pictures, that if you don't understand the difference between the two, you will never be able to make the job transition because you will be so intimidated and you will never think that you're smart enough to make the transition because you will consistently be second guessing yourself. Like, am I smart enough to actually do this? And you're going to think that the industry is going downhill. Let me give you all a little bit of honesty. During this phase, when a company is growing, they are hiring. They're hiring. When a company is growing, do you think that they're worried about firing people?
Not really.
Fun fact, they're not. And guess what? I'm going to take this a little bit further. And Zach pointed this out. Zach, if you're in the chat, I would love to hear you speak up on this. I don't know if you're in the chat, though. The developers that you hire take about 1 year to know if they are good or not. So Alex, it could take a year for an employer just to know if somebody was a good or bad hire because they have to have the time to onboard. So guess what happens? Imagine this. Imagine taking 5 years of growing fast just to realize that you now have a large portion of your staff that's untrained, unskilled, and unproductive. So they spent this long period of time growing. We're here to grow. We're an all growth company. We're here to innovate. That's what you hear from these CEOs and companies. We're here to innovate, to push the bar, to grow. They're raising billions of dollars. Did you see how much OpenAI just raised? They just raised like a lot of fucking money. I think it was like $150 billion, something insane like that. They're going to go on a hiring spree. Now, do you think that their management, do they have enough managers to know, oh, this guy's not good, we're going to fire him? No. They're going to be focused on the good developers. So when in growth mode, you're focused on what's good, not what's bad. In essence, the best way, if you were to put this on a bumper sticker, they're kicking the can down the road. A good example to think about this, everybody, has anybody got that bill in the mail and they're like, I'll just take care of it later? Right? I'll just take care of it later. Yeah, you're laughing because we've all experienced it. Like I've gotten parking tickets. It's like, dude, I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it later. So when you're in growth mode, what ends up happening, you end up hiring hundreds to thousands of employees because you just need help. But guess what happens if you do that for a very long time? Eventually winter comes. So I want you to imagine this is summer. This is winter. During summer, we have the ability to grow things, right? During summer, we can grow stuff. We can have a good time. And you're in Germany. What are the summers like in Germany? Or what are the winters like in Germany?
Winters are relatively cold. Summer's actually pretty nice. I
Okay.
do think that Denver's hotter. Our winters are pretty cold, though.
So the best way to imagine this, summer is a time of growing. Winter is a time of surviving. When we look back historically, before we got all the cool shit that we had now, historically, what we would always do in wintertime, and for all of you that are joining the chat, we've had more people join the stream. We're talking about business right now and how it relates to your job search as a developer, right? How the hiring and firing in the tech industry is not what it seems. It's not a scary industry. You need to have insights into what it means when there's all of these layoffs in the tech industry and what's right around the corner. So to come back to this, winter is a time of survival. Now, here's the thing that nobody talks about. I'm going to ask you a question about winter. Why do companies not want to make layoffs? Why would a company not? Now, looking at this, looking from the summer perspective, they're growing, they're growing, they're growing. Their stock price is increasing. I'm even going to add this. People are getting rich. AF. They're getting rich, dude. They're getting rich. So why then would people not want to do layoffs? Even if it's good for the company. Glance at the chat, Zach or Alex. Why do you think they don't want to do it?
Oh yeah, it's the stock price. If you are high up in the company and you also own stock, then it's also going to impact your personal what's the word? Sometimes I still struggle.
Just how much you're
your
worth.
Money.
Your money.
Yeah. Your net worth, exactly. And then of course, still the entire negative connotations to media, the scandal, all that.
So this is a perfect way to put it. The stock prices take a gigantic hit. I'm going to turn off the screen share for just a moment for us to talk about this. So here's what's really interesting about this, right? What ends up happening is you have these people who made so much money during the growth phase of the company, right? Now winter comes, and it turns out you have all these developers who have just hid in the shadows. They're not doing anything. Does anybody remember the stories of when Elon would show up to Twitter? And first off, he showed up with that big toilet, and he was like, "This company's circling the toilet. We're firing everybody," right? By the way, it's okay for y'all to have a different perspective than me on this. All I need is all of you to understand my perspective. I think what he did was amazing. Now, Alex, you might sit there and be like, "Dude, he fired thousands of people. How is that okay?" Is that like almost what you think? It's completely reasonable. Is that probably what you think?
For me, it's just I mean, I'm not really schooled on it. So my thing is, my general perspective is layoffs are pretty bad for the people that they happen to, and you are confused as to why so many people get laid off, but you don't know the ends. So that's all.
That's okay.
I can really say.
So this is the entire point, though. That's why I'm going to continue to invite students on here. It's good that you don't know. This isn't about you knowing or not knowing. What this is about is where are your feelings and what do you think? And how does that impact your thought on a job search? How does it impact your thought on what the business environment looks like and what your work life is going to look like as a software engineer? That's all that matters right now. That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
It's not about proving you wrong. I don't want to do that.
So it's okay. Thank you. I want to say when you read about a company like Twitter or another company laying off, you might be a little hesitant to throw your hat in the ring and apply for that particular company. But there's still, from what I've seen, One or two companies that I'm personally interested in, where I would kind of sift through the job search and I can see, oh, they still have an open position for development. So, just because the big names fire people doesn't mean that there's other opportunities out there, maybe even in a field that you want to be in.
So let's add a little bit of caveats to this. The entire purpose of us talking about Twitter, the entire purpose of it is not necessarily about working at Twitter or any of the big larger companies. The main purpose is so that you have a better understanding of how to get a job in these industries. Because the problem with Twitter, it encapsulates the umbrella of companies in tech more than anything else. So the point that I really want to get at above all else, when you're wanting to get a job in tech, you have to understand that what companies do, especially when they first get started, is they hire on a lot of people. And typically they don't have good management, which means that the new developers struggle to figure out how to fucking help anybody. They get hired and they just said, hey, I just need you to work on this. And they're like, well, what do you mean work on this? Like, I need help. Like, it's what? Why do you think so many of us, whenever we give you projects in the program, we're like, you just need to start on this? And you're like, what do you mean I need to start on this? How am I supposed to do this? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. How am I going to do this? It's like, you have to figure it out. You have to start learning those skills, because I'm guaranteeing the vast majority of you, when you get hired, that's how they're going to treat you. They will not give you great onboarding. They're not going to teach you about the full tech stack. They're not going to show you about a lot of the code. You're going to have to kind of figure shit out on your own. Almost all these larger companies do the exact same thing. So what ends up happening, this is just to overview all of this, then I'm actually going to bring Peter on. What ends up happening is that we hire all of these people into a company. You grow fast, but you don't have the infrastructure to support those new hires. So for every 10 developers you hire, you may only actually have 1 or 2 good ones. The rest are not good. By the way, I just want to let y'all know that's a fact. That's a universal employment fact. You typically have to hire 3 to 4 people to have 1 person who will be a good fit. That's a fact in employment. It doesn't matter if they're good people. These are capable people who have good character. That's what it's mostly about. So what ends up happening, layoffs happen because the company reaches a point to where, like, hey, listen, we've grown a lot. We've gained a lot of market share. It's now time for us to fire all of the people who are not bringing in the value to the table that they need to, so that we can get down to our core team, and then we could rebuild again. Because guess what's going to happen? In like 10 more years, Twitter's going to have more layoffs. Apple will have more layoffs. Like, everybody goes through a fast growth phase, and then they will fire an ungodly amount of people. Like NVIDIA right now. NVIDIA is growing really fast for all their chips and everything along those lines. Guess what's going to happen? NVIDIA, within the next 3 to 5 years, most likely, might be longer than that, will have gigantic layoffs. Then everybody's going to freak out and say, are they going downhill, right? They're going to sell their shares because they don't want to be buying shares when it's at an all-time high. They're going to sell everything. The stock price is going to plummet, right? They're going to lay off everybody, and then they will eventually start hiring again after they get down to a manageable group of people. So essentially, the best way to imagine it is a bear. During summer, bears will eat everything because they need to put on a lot of fat. They need to prepare for winter. Then winter comes, and then they end up just trying to survive. So Alex, that was the main point of me wanting to bring you on, just to be that student perspective. I really appreciate you doing that. We're going to continue to do this over and over and over again, because me just sitting here talking at y'all is not going to be helpful all the time. Having that engagement, especially in the chat, is so powerful. So you're good to go. I can't explain enough how much I appreciate you. I'm going to bring Peter on here in just a moment. And please continue letting me know in the chat. What I want to know also is, what else can I do for you as a student and everybody else to help you continue making that 10% improvement, right? Jumping from October 1st to where you are now, making that 10% improvement in the program and the curriculum, that's amazing. Let me know what I can continue to cover to help you in that process. I mean that seriously. DM me.
Thank you.
Like, my sole focus 11 to 1 during this time zone is to do everything I can to help Alex, Jason, Breadstick, all of you guys. That's all I want to do here. So
I
I'm here to serve
appreciate
y'all during
that.
this time period.
I definitely recommend to everyone that's watching, if you ever have the opportunity to jump on here, to do it, because I already think that there's a couple things that I learned, some that I've strengthened my knowledge on. So do it. And thank you for having me, Nathan. And
Dude, anytime.
I will see you in the chat.
Talk to you in just a bit. All right, everybody.
Have a good
So
one.
as Alex is leaving here, I'm going to prep to bring Peter on. And what we're going to want to talk to Peter about, and everybody, please in the chat, give Alex a big round of applause. Like, it's amazing to have somebody come on and be so damn helpful for what he's bringing to the table. He's an amazing person. He's doing great in this community. He's really somebody you could look up to. Now, what we're about to have now is have Peter come on the program. And what we're going to be talking about and hearing from Peter is, okay, we hear about these peaks and valleys, like the growth stage and the winter stage, essentially. What's happening at companies during that time period, right? What is it like when a company hires 10 to 15 developers? And as an entry-level developer, why are so many employers very hesitant to hire you? Like, this matters so much. I want each and every one of you to understand the business POV of when you're wanting to get a job. Why would an employer not want to hire you? And the more that you understand that, the higher likelihood you have a chance of succeeding. So when Peter joins in just a moment, we're going to be covering that. Now, what I'm going to do real quickly is I'm going to glance through the chat to figure out what we had going on, because I know there's a lot of great messages that were coming in. What is the layoff cutoff? 1 or 2 layoffs won't rock the boat, but 80% definitely will do so. Well, so Arnold, that's funny. That's kind of the point that was made with Twitter, right? Elon laid off 80% of all the employees. Does anybody, did it impact Twitter at all? Not really. Like, it didn't seem like it impacted fucking anything. Especially when they talk about Jeff Bezos, hilarious. Cool. So I think we have Peter in the waiting room now. So I'm actually, Zen, you made a really good post. I'm actually going to come to this. So we're going to address this comment from Zen. I'm going to let Peter in right now. And I actually want, this is something really helpful to talk about. Hey, Peter, thank you for joining, by the way.
Hey.
So what you're going to see, what we just got done talking about, let me share my screen here just to give you some context of everything we're covering. So what we just talked about was something that we talked about last night, how companies go through, let me just start with the basic premise real fast, just to give you an update. We talked about how a lot of individuals who are entry-level developers wanting to make a career transition, how they'll see something like Twitter laying off 80% of their staff, and they'll hear about all the other tech companies doing big layoffs of thousands upon thousands of employees. And they'll freak the fuck out. They'll be like, dude, I don't know how I'm going to be able to get a job in this industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then what I wanted to talk about was we transitioned to, hey, there's growth stages of companies, and then there's the layoff stage. And every company will always go through this cycle, right? And we talked about how when you're growing, you're hiring employees, your revenue's increasing, even though your cash flow is typically decreasing. And then when you have layoffs, you trim the fat, you need to save money, the bad media, all this stuff, right? Then we transitioned over to this graph right here. And we talk about when a company's growing, typically, their stock price goes up. Now, when a company has layoffs, their stock price drops, right? And it's kind of the difference between summertime and wintertime. During summer, you're getting big, you're getting bulky, if you're like a bear or something like that, and you're preparing for the winter. And the wintertime is when you make those layoffs. Now, the reason so many companies wait a long time to do layoffs is because when you start doing layoffs, you take big hits in your stock prices, right? Now, what I want to transition away from just a little bit is from necessarily talking about this. And what I want to go to is a great question that was asked, which was, and this is the question I really want to present to you. When you're at a company, and let's say you have a dev team of, if you have a development team, Peter, of like 10 people at maybe like a mid-sized startup, 10 developers, what would typically be the makeup of those developers? How many of them would be mid, senior, and entry level?
So typically in startups, you have a lot more senior developers. just because you're trying to move fast, you're trying to capture parts of the market. So you're trying to move quickly, and you do that with more senior
So let's say we have
developers.
about like 8 senior devs. Fair thing
Yeah.
to say. Okay.
Not quite 8, probably like 7, 6, and then some mid levels, and then a junior or 2.
We'll say 6 senior. We'll say 3 junior or mid,
Yeah,
and then 1 entry.
or 2. Yeah, sure.
We'll say 1
2.
entry level. Now, real quickly, what is the impact of what is this entry level person typically doing on your average dev team?
I mean, the goal is that you grow them into being a useful contributor of the company. But I think in general they're a cost and a time sink. They're not that valuable, but they can do stuff depending on the scope of work. They're able to do smaller projects.
So most entry level devs are a lot do you lose money off them? Is that fair to say?
It's hard for me to say, just because but I think that they're not as productive. And if you're in the market, like a startup market, where you're trying to capture market share quickly and build products quickly, they're not necessarily as valuable. And you can see that as to why they're hiring more seniors, less mids and less entry, right?
Now, why would somebody want to start hiring entry-level devs? Is the benefit hey, you have some developers who are ready to start working on developing other people? Like, you have some developers who like the idea of mentoring?
They're not completely useless. They're capable of doing things with oversight. They are able to build smaller features with oversight. They're able to do things. They're able to write
They're
code.
great. They
just
can
need
build
more
small
hand-holding.
features with oversight.
Yeah.
They need hand-holding.
But then also you're just growing your dev team, and you're, getting people who are familiar with the product. And the hope is that over the couple of years that you have them, that they turn into useful members. They may not be great at working on other code bases, but they're very familiar with yours at that point. So, they're able to make bigger and bigger contributions as they go.
Now, is one of the big benefits of hiring entry-level devs is that you can hire this person at a lot more affordable rate? Because your senior devs are being paid how much, you think, over here?
Depends on whether it's a startup or a big company, but anywhere from 200 to 600.
Well, let's say 200,000. These guys are getting paid 200,000. Let's just be the modest number. That mid-level is probably getting paid around 120?
120 to, something.
And the entry level is maybe 60,000?
60 to 90, I guess.
Let's go 60,000. We're going to low numbers for all of these. So it seems like the real benefit is you could hire somebody who could do a lot more basic work for the company. What does that basic work maybe look like? Let's say, for example, we're working on Ziggy right now. If you were to hire an entry-level dev, what would that person do?
So sometimes it's throwaway projects, hey, I need a report and I need somebody who can go into this database and connect to this database or connect to our APIs and, pull out data for me. Or I need... there's this bug that we've been working on, and it's relatively simple. Go and find out the issue, come back to me with a plan, and then solve that. So the scope of work can be anything.
But it's just work that typically doesn't require a lot of oversight.
No, but before that code goes into the main code base, there's going to be revisions likely to that, someone's done. But that's why we keep the scope of it small, because if you had a junior developer build a big feature, maybe they've architected it completely incorrectly, and it's the way they've done it is not actually going to work at scale or for the company, or it's not going to work in the real world, or it's too inefficient, or it's just badly done. It's not extendable for whatever reasons. There's so many reasons.
Got it.
And you don't want to give them the time to work on something that large and then have it turned back because it's not applicable.
Got it. So when you're hiring an entry-level developer, you want to hire somebody who can now take on a lot of the projects that don't need a lot of oversight and it has very limited scope.
Yes.
Great. So when would you say that that's really practical? For example, Ziggy, the sales support tool that we have. Are you at a point where you could have somebody help with this yet, or is it too
help
small?
with us? Yes. Help with it, yes, but not juniors.
Not juniors. So okay, so we don't need entry-level devs yet. At what point does a company typically need a lot of entry-level devs?
I would say when we're much more sure about what the product is and where it's going. There's not larger architectural questions to be answered. Like we still don't know how we're going to do a lot of things.
So would you say the team will most likely have a size of 3 to 5 developers by then?
Yeah, probably at least.
So at least 5 developers. So when someone has a team, about 5 developers, that's when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I think is really interesting, because what we want to talk about here is how the fuck, essentially, do we reach the point to where we have these gigantic layoffs? And as somebody who has nearly 2 decades of experience, one thing that you've mentioned a lot is that companies will hire devs, but it's easy for them to hide.
In larger companies, yeah. I've worked at one large company, and there were a lot of people hiding there.
Tell me a little bit more. What do you mean that there's a lot of people hiding?
I mean, I worked for a very large mortgage broker at one point in my life. And there was a lot of work that happened, but there was a lot of bureaucracy that had to happen. And a lot of people could get away because of all that bureaucracy and inefficiencies in the companies. A lot of people got away with doing almost nothing.
So when you have the big team, right? The big business, which is over here, we're going to put big business, big biz, right? We're going to loop this together. This down. Okay, so we got big business, then everybody, we got the small business right here. By the way, in addition, all of you that are listening right now, this is the perfect time to have some questions for Peter. This is the most qualified, best mentor, best software engineer, everything in the entire program. Entry level, any of those questions, fears of the market, this is the perfect time to really bring those out. So going back to this, big business, the reason why a lot of people hide is their bureaucracy.
There's also just a lot of software engineers. Like, my guess is that that mortgage broker worked.
Is there like a poor ratio of developers to manager?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to happen. So smaller teams are generally more efficient because, like, you know, everyone, it's like very easy to get things done. There's not a lot in the way. But when you have a large company like that broker I worked for, you know, there's a lot of different teams, and sometimes communication between those teams takes a lot of time, or like figuring out who owns like this code or this stuff takes a lot of time. So like there's just a lot of bureaucracy and like hoops you have to jump through to get things done. Like, you know, that company probably had 30, 40 teams of 10 to 15 people.
Oh my God. So okay. Would it surprise you if that company turned around and laid off?
They did.
100 developers. Oh, okay. So what happened?
Oh, they laid off a lot of developers.
How many developers do you think got laid off?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Like a lot. Like, I don't know. It's probably not public knowledge. They're a private company.
Okay. Now, obviously no one knows who the company is. Now, quick question. By the way, everybody, I'm having to autocorrect everything. Peter's going to roast me. He's going to probably send me messages after this for not spelling things correctly. So if y'all catch any bad spelling, please let me know so Peter doesn't roast me after for it. The developers that were laid off, why do you think they were laid off?
I mean, I think a lot of them were people that were hiding. I think part of it was the market. You know, interest rates went up, less people were buying houses. I think that they realized with the new market that a lot of the things they were building for, maybe that changed, and like there wasn't necessarily a team or a place for those people. But typically, like they weren't like the cream of the crop, right? They weren't the guy.
So would you say that the devs, more than anything else, were a lot of them hired, they didn't have great training to come on board and probably enjoyed the fact that they could just sit there, not do anything and collect checks? And they were not taking initiative to try to get better?
I think so. I mean, yeah, like they used a very niche language for a lot of their code. A lot of people were hired on and then just spent like 2 weeks doing nothing, or like it's just very easy, and like it's very easy to like slip into there's not really high expectations for me, and I don't really have the drive, so it's very easy for them to just slip into the pattern of, well, I'm just gonna sit here and collect that money, do like 2-3 hours of work a day.
Now, the reason I bring this up is it seems like when people talk about the software engineering market, they're always talking about larger companies, like mid-sized companies doing 50 million plus, right? Of course, there's a lot of startups doing a lot less than that, but they're always talking about teams that have large teams. Obviously, you can't hide in a small business, right? Small business with, let's say, 20 devs. That's going to be a lot harder to run from, right?
Yeah, because everyone can see what you're doing.
Okay.
Are you pushing code? No? Well, why not?
So it's really straightforward from there.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the larger companies, it seems like the sentiment, though, of confidence in technology and SaaS as a whole is determined by the large companies, not the small companies, for entry-level people. Like anybody who's entry-level trying to make the career transition, they're making their thought process on getting a job on what's happening with the top companies rather than what startups are hiring, for example, or what small companies are hiring.
And also, when I started in this world, like I didn't go work for those larger, more elite companies. I started off like on much less professional companies. Like, I worked for a tiling company doing inventory management, and I built out like software for that before like there were like proper CRMs for it. And it was like they didn't want to pay me the salaries that like a senior developer would have been paid, and I wasn't worth it. And that's kind of how I, started. I didn't go immediately to like somewhere fancy.
So
I didn't go up to like a cool startup. Like I was doing not that cool work, but it was getting me experience to be able to go for much cooler work, much cooler projects.
So this seems like it almost answers Isaiah. Isaiah had a question. He said, as an entry-level dev, would you get more experience at a small biz or a big biz?
So it's a hard question. Like there's both. At a larger company, given the right team structure, like given that you have like like a person that will help you grow, undoubtedly the best. But there's not a lot of companies that are necessarily going to hold your hands like that. Like it's tough. But that is number one. Like if you could latch yourself onto like a person that knows what they're doing, even like a mid-level, and they were like supporting you all the time and helping through things, that's the best way. But I also believe that a really good way to learn and understand is to like take it upon yourself, like go through Uncle Bob Martin's books, read that stuff, like read how is he like organizing code, how is he setting up testing, work on like other jobs where maybe you're the only developer, because I've been in that like early on in my career, like where I was the only developer, and like using those resources, and like I get to experiment, right? Like I get to play around.
So if we go to Amazon right now, Uncle Bob is Robert C. Martin, correct?
Yeah, he actually also has a really cool. You can find some of his videos on YouTube. They're very funny. He's a very quirky person.
Slick real fast.
Yeah. I just searched clean code or something, like alongside that.
So, this series is badass, isn't it?
Yeah, it was very good.
Like this
so I went through this like, at some point in my career, and I found it to be really useful. He's, a great resource, but using resources like this to kind of solve my problems, or like doing research, like I have this type of problem. What's a good way to solve this? And like, how can I solve this in a way that's clean? And you like learn yourself, and you teach yourself to learn and be more efficient. And like that is, I think, second best.
So learning to ask, how can I solve this? How can I be more efficient?
How can I solve this problem in a more elegant way?
And it seems like this is almost like just a loop running through your head.
Yeah. Like a very simple loop is, and like you get better at this loop, right? Because you get better at these optimizations. But make it work, and then make it work faster, and then make it work faster, and then like how can I just keep on making this more efficient? How can I make this better? And like always looking at your code and being like, how can I make this better? What don't I like about this? and being conscious about the code you're writing, not just getting to work and being like, oh, thank God. Like, no, like you got it to work. Now, how can you make this better? Like, how can you make this intuitive? How can I make it so that people can extend this, or I can extend this? Because I promise you, there are so many ways.
Now, one thing you say a lot, you don't like the idea of writing clean code that's easier to scale, right? You use the term extend. Can you expand on that? Because I think this is something that's a completely foreign concept to all of our students right now.
For me, scale, you and I use scale differently. When I think scale, I think users and load. And that's just because I'm talking from, engineering perspective. Like, okay, cool. The code I wrote that worked for 100 users is not going to work for 10,000 users, which is not going to work for 1 million users. Like, how do I make that happen? And to me, that's scaling. Extend is, I think, what you use, where I've written some code and, maybe this is applicable in multiple areas of the business, but I don't want to have to rewrite that code. So how do I write it so that, other parts of the code base can make use of this? And how is it intuitive? And like splitting those out into logical modules or packages or whatever your language or whatever you're whatever you're calling them in that language, like namespaces. How do I extend it so it's easy to use and easy to understand, easy to test?
So the reason why I think this matters is this terminology that's typically used by professionals.
Yeah, did you want me to say something to that?
Yeah, like is this the terminology?
Yes.
That
Is it? Yes.
So the reason why I say that matters, for example, do you remember weeks ago when we had the AI challenge?
Yep.
And some of our students were like, yeah, I'm going to use the ChatGPT API to do X, Y, Z. And I was like, hey, guys, we do not say that. We say we're working with OpenAI. Do not say you're using ChatGPT's API, right? You're working with API or OpenAI. Like, you look like you don't belong here, right? You have to look like you belong. So, for example, this terminology, if someone's using this terminology versus what do you think is the opposite? Like, if they use scale as extend, essentially.
Yeah, sure.
If they switch these,
I think you're just using the wrong term. I think it was confusing for me when you first started using scale, because to me it meant something different, and I think most software engineers that means something different.
So if you're talking to like a mid-level developer and they're misusing these phrases, right? Is it going to change the way you look at them?
Yes, because I expect them to know those terms at that point.
Now, if you have an entry-level dev coming in and he's able to understand these phrases, he's able to understand and ask questions about, hey, what's your onboarding process like for new devs? Because I want to make sure that I can contribute relatively fast. I know that most entry-level devs have a small scope of work they typically work on. They work on bugs, a lot of things like that. Like, what's your process for helping someone like myself do that? And they're using the terminology and all of this stuff better. Would that help that person stand out exponentially more?
Yeah, like not being afraid to ask questions, not being afraid to try to understand. Like, don't be afraid to look stupid. Like, I have almost no expectations for you, but like if you show up and pretend like you know things, then then I have expectations of you, and you're just doing yourself a disservice. Like, if you don't ask questions, I'm going to assume you understand what I'm talking about.
That makes so if they're going through the interview process, okay, this is interesting. If you don't ask questions, then I'm going to assume, I love doing this if then just to pretend I'm smart. Mm-hmm. Assume you know what your
so like let's give like a code interview, right? So I lay out the problem and then you just go straight into coding. I'm going to assume that you understood the problem. And then it's on you when you mess up because you didn't understand the problem. Or I'm just or if you get it wrong, I'm going to think, well, he didn't think, or she didn't think through this problem enough to notice these obvious pitfalls in this problem. So by asking questions, you get to talk to me and you get free hints as to how to solve the problem.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like 90% of people that we asked coding questions to whenever we were interviewing for instructors and stuff like that, when we did something like this, they just started doing stuff, then they got stuck and then started asking questions.
Yeah.
Is that just like a clear sign this person's I'm being dramatic when I say idiot, but this person is not going to be a good hire? Like if they start doing that from day one in an interview.
I wouldn't go so far to say that, but like it's definitely like a warning signal. Right.
And
So,
how big of a warning signal though is it?
I mean, it depends whether they got it right or not.
Let's say just regardless, they're starting the project and they just get stumped and then they start asking questions. Versus asking questions at the beginning.
It's like if I asked you to take me to like Walmart and then you just drove to Target, like, or you just drove to the wrong. You drove to Walmart like somewhere else. I'm like, cool.
It's like,
but,
I guess you took us somewhere. Like this kind of sucks. I wanted something from Walmart.
Yeah, like if you're not answering, you're not giving me what I want. Like the whole idea is given like a set of someone, and like sometimes I'm intentionally vague. Like given a set of like these vague requirements, like what's your problem solving process like? Are you gonna like notice that like this is intentionally vague, or are you just gonna try and do it? Like we actually did. For some of our job seeking applicants, I give them like a problem, like kind of like interview question style thing every week. And one about 2 weeks ago, I was intentionally vague in that I gave them data that was broken. Do you know how many people asked about that?
How many?
2.
Out of how many?
Right now, I think 10.
Only 20% asked. So you could pretty much just throw the other 80% applications out. If that was
but they didn't solve the problem because they got stuck on broken data.
So the other 80% are just thrown out immediately, pretty much, right?
I mean, sure, they didn't solve the problem. So.
And then the other 20%, they came back and asked, at least they have a chance for a follow-up, kind of, right?
Maybe. I haven't looked at that project yet.
Okay, so I want to address this, and I know that Peter, this is gonna, just so you know, Isaiah, what's going to end up happening? We're going to get a vague answer, but I'm going to squeeze Peter to get something of meaning out of this. I just made this show up on the stream. If you just look at it, Peter, but show on stream. Isaiah asked, "How do I know what questions to ask? Is there common questions that you should ask, like in an interview process or when they're doing stuff like this?"
I mean, I think if you're doing a coding interview, I think you should know exactly what people are, what the question is, and like what the desired result is, and like, like at least start with that, and then like try to think through the problem, talk about the problem and how you want to solve that problem, and talk through the steps. And then they might give you be like, cool. So given this data that looks like this, I'm going to iterate through it, and I'm going to add 5 to everything. And then you'll look at the data and you'll be like, well, one of those is a letter. What do you expect that I do in these cases? And that's that's a very contrived example, but how do you navigate that? It shows that you're putting thought into like what you're doing, and like you're trying to get to the place we want you to go in an optimal way. And then like you talk about like what you think their requirements or what the outcome of this is, like what does that data look like when it comes out? Maybe I haven't specified it. Maybe I'm just saying like, go through this data and give me a report Well, what's included in that report? So like, you have to think through the problems and think about like what the outcome of that is. So you like that's kind of on a case by case basis. When asking questions about the business, try to show that you're trying to understand the problem they're trying to solve, right? So maybe they are, keeping, I don't know, inventory of tiles, to go back to a previous example, roofing tiles. Cool, like what problems are you currently experiencing? Like how, where do you expect me to fit in this role? Like what are you looking for? Show interest, like tell me about your company. Like who's your market? Like just show that you're interested in the company, like interested in them, like not just a source of money for you. Because like maybe you are, but like this is going to be something that you're going to spend 40 hours a week doing. try to show some interest in what you're going to be spending your time doing.
So I see. What problems specifically are you currently facing? What are some other technical problems, just to clarify how you could help out there?
Well, like maybe you're not going to be the one solving them, but like, like I'm always curious, like, cool, you're hiring for a person in this department. What types of problems are you solving? Like why? Like why is this, why are you hiring? Like, what are your needs? And then like, they'll be like, well, yeah, we have this scaling problem here. And then I'll be like, cool, well, how are you doing that? Like what, like, if it's a queuing problem, like what queue are you using? Like what, like how like anything, like just show that you're thinking about what they're trying to do and that like you're interested in it. You don't have to give a response or tell them how to do it. Just show that you're interested. And show that you're eager to learn and grow. Like there's a common saying in like the software world, like hire for attitude, not necessarily aptitude. And I think that's mostly true. Like I think that like
Wow.
you don't have like like depending on where you are, but like when hiring junior engineers, like I want someone who's not going to come in thinking they're like hot shit.
Because they're dog water, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's just like, I know you suck, but that's okay.
That's okay. Like show me that like if I try to help you with something that you're eager to learn, or like you're going to like try to figure this out.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is what's most important here is the philosophy that you care, you're interested, and that this individual's eager to learn and grow. Like that's the most important thing above all.
Because we know you suck.
Can you emphasize on that more?
Yeah, because I know you suck, and if I don't know it now, like I probably will know after the interview. Like, okay, you're a junior engineer. You're expected to suck. Like, and that's the beauty. Like, you have no expectations other than to, try.
It seems like people are really confused on this, though. Like, but I just graduated from this program, and I built this. What do you mean I suck? Right? Can you give the humble check that people really need, but also connect them to reality? Like, one of the things we emphasize is
you now know how to walk.
So they can walk. That's it.
Yeah.
I get it, but from a professional standpoint, like from your POV, can you give a true glimpse of why they suck, which is okay, by the way, why they suck, but what they need to do to improve?
I mean, to improve, it's the same thing. Practice, keep doing, keep practicing.
But let's be specific. What does that practice do for you? Does it give you the ability to look deeper into architecture? Does it give you the ability to better understand the problems that you're solving?
There's a lot of problems that I don't necessarily have to put too much thought into because I have a good mental model of how I want to solve that and like how that is solved, how that has worked out for me in the past. So I've built a lot of things, and I've built a lot of things that didn't work very well. I've also built some things that work very well. And like the stuff that works very well is because, I was able to make the right choices. How do I get good at making the right choices? By practicing making those choices. And a lot of those like architectural things, right? Like, so you can be like really good at algorithms, like really, really good at algorithms, but you're still probably shit if you're a junior engineer at putting together a large system and having all that work together. Because like, how are you formatting these problems? How are you like putting all this together in a system that's efficient? It's not just about like writing some functions very well. Like I worked on code bases that are like a couple 100,000 lines of code. How do I make that so that somebody else can come into this and work on it as well?
Okay,
like,
let's think about this.
That all in my head.
Let's think about that for a moment. You're stepping into a code base, right? And everybody, you'll have some amazing questions I'm going to come to in the chat in just a moment, right? So we got right over here. I'm going to zoom out some. We have Peter, right? So we got Peter right here. And you're stepping into this gigantic, I'm going to be dramatic here, this gigantic code base with all of these lines, with hundreds of thousands of lines, right? What's the first thing you do the moment you step into a company and you see a database with 100,000 lines of code? what's the first thing that you're going to start asking or questioning to be able to actually help out?
Well, so like typically, even as like a more senior person, they're not just going to be like, "Here's a code base, good luck." Like they're not going to do that. Typically, they're going to have like a set of problems they want me to solve, which will like isolate me to a part of the code base, and like that'll get me familiar. But like and then as like stuff is needed, like I'll like use like because IDs and code stuff is really nice these days. You can move along and like jump into other parts and you can start exploring. But like, how intuitively is that laid out, right? Like, how did they separate their code? How did they modularize their code? Like, how did they separate the concerns? Separation of concerns is like a concept that you'll learn at some point. And it just means that like, stuff that's related to donkeys goes in one folder and like deals with donkeys. And then like, maybe there's another thing that deals with whales. And like, then like sometimes, they're both animals. So there's code that deals with both of those, but like, how do you make it so it's intuitive so I can read the names of like the folders or the files and kind of have an understanding of that? And then you start looking at like inside of those files, like what's the entry point into this code? Like, are all these functions public? Because if so, that's a weird interface. I want it to be clear as to how I'm supposed to use this. And like, so you just start exploring, like you start working on parts and then eventually you're introduced to other parts and you just kind of grow from there. But like typically for me, and companies I've worked in, it generally starts with like a problem that needs to be solved. And they'll generally try to give you like when you're starting, like senior or junior, like something isolated or a feature or something that's like isolated to a particular portion of the app.
So when you're getting started, they're going to give you a limited and isolated scope of work, essentially.
Yeah,
now,
and hopefully you don't have to go to. I've had it where I've had to go all over the app on my first project, right?
Got it.
It's just what it is.
What I'm hearing from all of this, all of these questions seem to lead to one thing. It seems like it leads to the goal. It seems like the goal of stepping into the database is to be able to know how to navigate the code base. Correct me if I'm wrong. It seems like that's the ultimate initial goal when first stepping into something that's completely foreign to you.
Yeah, like understand how to navigate and read it. It's just reading code. And I encourage everybody to do this. Like, go find an big open source project on GitHub and start reading like commits, so like pull requests people put up, and like start reading code and getting familiar with what that does. You start getting so much better at it. Start looking at the feedback people give them. Like, because generally like those successful projects have good developers on them. Like, look at the feedback.
So
what do they say? Why
start
is this bad?
looking at the feedback.
Yeah, like the feedback's not for you, but like you can learn something from it.
So start looking at the feedback in public GitHub repos.
Yeah, so
can you give me an example of one? Can we go to GitHub right now and look at an example of one?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So github.com, I'll log in real fast. I'll send you a password. So I'm logging in right now, and if you could send me one and show me how to navigate it.
I'm sure.
Or if you want to share your screen, you can do it.
No, it's okay. Mine's kind of confusing. I'm trying to think. So Ruby on Rails.
Why is this not letting me? There we go.
So
sorry, guys, I'm waiting to get my. Oh fuck! It's gonna make me verify this puzzle. To rotate the object in direction. Okay, submit. Done. Send password, reset email. Okay, that's cool, man.
So here, like, these are pull requests that people have done, right?
So let me open this up. Sorry, it's not letting me log into GitHub. Give me 1 second. Okay, share this tab instead. Okay, cool. Walk me through here. How can somebody go through this and understand how to read it?
So like these are pull requests that people have made. So then what I would do is like click that first one. Right here? Fix only 5.3, whatever, like the second one. Okay. And like someone's done a review maybe. Oh, there's no reviewers. So like then go set the filter for reviewers.
Okay. Is the review approved?
Yeah. Or changes requested actually. There'll probably be another one.
Requested.
Cool, and then just click on that one with 42 right there. add active support testing. And this is a framework you guys won't be familiar with because this is in a language called Ruby, and it's a very popular framework. But you can like click files changed right there, and you can see what the person did. So he did a bunch of stuff. It doesn't matter. Like no one cares.
It's okay. Walk them through though. Why should they be looking at this the way it is?
Because you're gonna like scroll down, you're gonna find people who have left comments on this pull request.
So like this one right here. And I keep getting hung up under instrumentation, being in the class and assertion names. It feels like a mouthful and prone to misspellings. I think it's something assert event payload would be better. I'm curious what other core team members would think about the name and if they have it. Thanks for looking at a lot. Fair instrumentation naming wise is a bit complicated.
I think that's complicated.
Okay. In fact, the original naming scheme was all based around just events such as assert event and assert no events. We pivoted into the current naming scheme as we thought the former was a bit too generic for both semantically and such as it would cause naming conflicts thread here. So what is the like? So right
so
here, you're getting
he's talking about like why like the name choices he gave to those was not great. So he's like, hey, other core team members, what do you think?
Is this what communication will look like for
Yes.
most students when they first start their job? So they can start
Absolutely,
getting
yes.
comfortable with what real communication will look like on the job.
Yeah.
Can we think of a project that you could send me that maybe is related to JavaScript or
Yeah, so
something like that we can
Look at Express.js. They all use Express.js.
Yeah. Go and send it to me and I'll open it up.
GitHub. I'm sure they have a community, like a pull request and stuff around here. Here you go.
Cool.
I'm going to send to you now.
So let's look at Express.js. Let me move this over. Let's share this tab instead. Okay. So we want to go to, first off, reviews, changes requested. So we have 3 days ago from August 23rd, February 24th.
Go to the second one.
The second one with 19 comments.
Yeah.
And
So
walk
if you
us
look at
through
the
what
files
you're
changed.
seeing.
So first thing I'm going to look at is files changed. I'm going to try to understand, right?
Why do you go straight
So-
to files changed, by the way? Let's go back.
Because I want to understand what he changed. So like if there's like files changed, he's probably done this with regards to your ticket.
Gotcha.
So he probably should have, according to an issue. So the first thing I'll go to is conversation.
So conversation is right over here.
And you'll see according to an issue, so I'll read that issue.
Click it.
Yeah. Well, I'll open a new window, but sure. So basically, HTTP modules, they now like allow status codes from 100 up to 199 to throw out of range error when encountering one. So if anything is bigger than 199, throw an exception. So this is like a simple one. And then they reference the RFC, which is like a technical specification, which you can read if you want to.
Right here.
Yep. That's going to be very technical. It's going to be about like request for changes. So this is like a very technical document.
Okay.
But you can read that. And then I'll go back to the issue and I'll go files changed. I'll be like, huh, what did you do? So he's now, like said, inside the history, it's like what changes he's done because like a lot of projects will have changes. He set like a set strict status code. So this is a flag inside the application. So like on
where are you seeing this at? Just so we're very clear. Are you pretty much seeing
so
the
like-
remove aspect?
So remove. So like he's talking about the changes he made. So line 6 or green 6, new line 6 and like deleted.
So all
red
the
and
green ones are the changes that he made, and he removed these previous ones.
Yes. So by default, reset status only accepts integers, and the input must be greater than 99 and less than 1000. We'll throw, if it's not that, we'll throw an out of range error, like for that, and we'll throw a status code error. You know, and he's just saying what this change does.
Got it.
So cool.
Got
Again,
it. Is there-
some projects will have this or not.
Is there
So
not any
then-
comments on this?
There's comments on this. So then he set a flag inside the lib application, I'm guessing, because like, you know, you could press that like up arrow there to see what the code does. So stop, go down, scroll down,
The up
keep going
flag.
down. So down a little bit more, expand up.
Right
So
here.
go up, no, bit on the other one,
My fault.
on lib.js. Yeah, go up, no, up. Click that one. So cool, this is the app default configuration. So I can see that he's setting a flag to set this stick status code to false. So basically saying it won't throw an exception if this is if it's out of that range. So cool, he set a flag. Cool. So that's the first thing he does, and that's outlined in this in the issue. So we scroll down. Keep them going. I want to see the green stuff, green and red stuff.
Gotcha.
Let's keep going down. So stop. Cool. So he's saying if strict status codes are set to true, then the code must be less than 100 and greater than 599. Must be greater than 100 and less than 599. Otherwise, throw this new range error, which he sets up somewhere, or maybe that was already existing. I don't know. So not there on line green 79.
Gotcha.
And then he set up a test watch. So this is a testing thing, so you can test it. And then now he's writing a test for this. So like it accepts a valid range. He's done some formatting stuff there. And then he writes a test to make sure it should raise an error. So green 132.
Yep.
So scroll down.
Green 132.
Scroll down. Green 132. Right. He's written a test to say if the should raise an error if it's bigger than 599. So let's go see what the comments are. So that's the whole change. Like this whole change. This is a relatively simple thing in this project.
What I want to go into is the overall idea of this. Then we'll go to some of the questions in the chat real quickly. What I'm seeing more than anything else is you're really big on this idea, like the thing that we hear you consistently say is intuitive. The only way that something can become intuitive with time, it seems like, is by spending a lot of time, for example, practicing just going into things like this and reading the code.
Or trying to, a lot of these projects will have beginner bugs. Oh, you're new to our code base. We want to invite you to work on this code base because it's free work for us.
Yep.
Right. Like maybe Express is probably run by an organization at this point. I don't know. But that any changes that need to happen, like someone has to do this. Someone has to write this code. So they're trying to bring new people into the code base to work on it. So they'll have they'll have beginner friendly bugs. Like a lot of like larger GitHub organizations will have, this is for beginners. Like go fool around and figure out and write code and try to figure out how to do it. Submit a pull request, someone will give you feedback. It's free. Like all you have to do is like practice.
It seems like what I'm hearing is having the mentality is a explorer, just above all else. You need to have an explorer's mentality. You're going to go into all kind of territory where you don't understand what the hell is happening, and that's okay. You just want to keep exploring and maybe look at, oh, he said something changes in line 132. Let's go see what that is. And then slowly trying to piece things together, but most importantly, getting familiar with the environment, getting familiar that this does not make sense to you, but that's okay, right? And spending time just trying to play around in environments like that. Does that seem like a fair way to kind of address it?
Yeah, like just practice. Like just practice. Like this don't, that's how you get good at things.
So being able just to step into kind of like just an environment like that and being able to be comfortable immediately exploring, what would that show to an employer? Because I'm willing to bet any entry-level dev that it's something like that you almost have to immediately go into.
So what's really cool about doing stuff like this is you put it on your damn resume. Like, yeah, I've contributed to these projects. Hey, you want to go see some of my work? Here's a link to the pull request. This is me, doing stuff because I want to be good at this. So here's some contributions I made to Express, or whatever tickles your fancy, right? Like whatever you want. And that's cool because you're no longer just some guy who has the same capstone project as everyone else. Like you have contributed, if it was Express, to a open source library that hundreds of thousands of people use. That's cool.
I love that. So I think that we can get ready to call this specific topic. We will come into more detail on it. I do want to answer some questions, then we'll put a wrap up for the day. Gabriel asked, how do you decipher whether you're at mid to senior level?
It's not really for you to decide. It's about scope of responsibility and how much.
How would somebody be able to tell if somebody's mid or senior level? What's the difference between the two?
What scope of project can I give you that you can handle by yourself? So it might not just be lines of code, but it could be architectural thing. Did you choose to make an HTTP call here when you should have used a queue? Or do you understand what a dead letter queue is? Or do you understand how to use these concepts? And how much can I leave you alone without having to worry about what you're doing? Is kind of my rule of whether you're junior, mid, or senior.
Yeah.
And then there's
Now-
obviously architects and fancy titles at like really big companies, which have some really badass people doing stuff.
Now, another question that was asked, I think, is pretty solid to address. Is
And can I add one more thing to that?
of course,
Like how consistently will your work yield good results? And like so like you did something like, are there bugs in it pretty frequently? Well, probably not that senior then. How well does it perform? Like you set up the project, are you having like performance issues? Like there's a lot of questions and a lot of stuff that you look at, like
that makes complete sense. So it's
are you
really
able to mentor people? Like a big thing for like seniors. Like you have to be able to like take someone and like help them grow. Like you see what's wrong.
It seems like what we're hearing more than anything else is really subjective. Like it's not an objective, oh, you need to write this many lines of code. Like that's not going to get you what you want to hear, essentially.
Yeah, like a senior at, say, Palantir, for example, is definitely not the same as a senior at Netflix. Not even close. Like this, it's different.
There's just levels to this, essentially.
Yeah.
So to get ready to wrap up on this, so basically experience and how the senior doesn't need to hover and hold their hand. Gabriel, I think that's a great way to put it. I really want to hit on a comment that was made by Neuro Muhammad. And he says, and I think this is actually really helpful, and I'll put it in the chat. I think what we were doing in DevSlopes is just a drop in the ocean, isn't it? I think that what's most important before you address like the learning perspective, it's more about why you were in DevSlopes. It's not necessarily the tech stack. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's more about getting the jetpack or the starship that will jump you from being a basic person with the mentorship to getting to a point to where you can make the progress that would take most people maybe 3 years on their own learning how to code in about a year. Is that a fair thing to say? Because it's mostly about getting the problem solving and getting the mentorship to learn how to think like a professional.
Yes. Like how do you think through these problems? And like we really want to like teach you how to do that in a way that's going to benefit you through your career.
Can you expand on that though for some of the students? Like what is the benefit? Like obviously it's a touch and it's a drop in the ocean, but what's actually happening in their learning experience here?
I mean, like if you look at some of the later projects, I don't actually care which languages or frameworks, or when you start getting to like the back end of the capstone, like what databases you're using. Like I encourage you to explore and learn how to figure out things yourself. What you find with a lot of other boot camps or universities is like you'll graduate and there's been like such a timeline on how long you have to learn that like you learn this tech stack and you're kind of pretty useless outside of that because you haven't necessarily got the foundation to.
And what's the foundation?
Just like proper core software engineering principles.
And could you give us just some ideas of what that looks like?
Oh man, like how are you laying out your code? How are you trying to set this up? So like, are you using the right concepts at the right time? Like it's like subtle nuances.
So it's something that you just have to learn as you're going through the experience. And these are things that you learn with mentors. You submit
like
codes and they're like, hey.
We try to do it through our assignments that like challenge you to like use like, do this, like here are like ways that are, like you can use these concepts, but like we're not necessarily super strict on which concepts we are, but like in some circumstances, people have passed assignments like using different concepts because that was applicable to that project at that time. And it was cool that like, hey, they went and they found like another way to do this that is perfectly reasonable and correct. And then like they still understand the other content. Like that's cool to see.
So everybody, we're going to go ahead. We're going to wrap for today. What I want us to do, the next steps for this, for all of you inside the program, I have the one ask for you. Go into the chat right now in Discord. And you need to write down everything that really stood out to you and your point of reflection between today and Monday. Your ultimate obstacle to be able to learn is dependent on your ability to retain information through practicing it, through playing with it, everything along those lines. So what I need all of you to do right now, go to Discord, and drop in. I have the general chat open right now. We need to be learning right now, what are the things that are standing out to you? What are the things that are helping you? What are the things that really were like, oh, I need to think about this right now? That's how we use these forms effectively. I'll bring Peter on more often so we could talk about this, how to get familiar, how to become more intuitive when looking through things. We can talk about this. We'll break this down from seeing like some alchemy science, right, to breaking it down to, hey, it's just steps A, B, C, D. We don't need to overthink it. A, B, C, D. It's a very philosophical, basic standpoint for critical thinking and problem solving. That's the goal here. Thank you, everybody, so much. Do not subscribe. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notifications button because you need to know the moment I'm going live so we can all jump in here. I'll see everybody on Monday, 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Do not forget to invite everybody else in the community. These are the times for all of us to get together, grow, and really learn how to connect ourselves to reality, understand the business POV, and find non-obvious solutions to get to where we want to go. I'll see everybody Monday.